All right, Sky Squad, we are back in the building. And of course, we got to talk about yet another interview that Carlos King did this week. And this time it was with none other than Real Housewives of Potomac star Gizelle Bryant, or Gizelle Kobe Bryant, as he likes to call her, for how she's been bobbing and weaving and dribbling all throughout every single storyline on this season of the Real Housewives of Potomac. And we are only 3 episodes in, baby. Sky Squad, we back in the building and we gotta talk about it, okay? We're gonna discuss the highlights of the episode. Of course, I'm gonna put the entire thing, the link in the description down below so that you guys can watch it for yourself. But baby, let me tell you, they get into some things, okay? They get into some things, and we're going to discuss them right now. Now, the first thing out the gate I want to talk about, because this is the first thing they talked about, is when Carlos King was on the Reasonably Shady podcast with Robin and Gizelle that comes out every Monday, guys. If you are fans of Robin and Gizelle, make sure you support the ladies and listen to their podcast. Listen, on these shows, we may dislike a character. We may hate a person, we may love a person, we may love to hate a person, but at the end of the day, especially for our Black queens, we want to make sure that we send some support their way. So make sure you guys check them out on Mondays, okay, on the iHeart. But anyway, last time they talked, okay, on the podcast platform, y'all know Bravo came a calling Miss Gizelle Bryant. Oh yes, she got in trouble for the tea that was spilt in that episode. So I implore you to go back and listen to it, okay? Because you know that's how they do with the podcast. You listen to it. It's auditory, as they say. But anyway, so yeah, she got in trouble for that. So she's got to keep it cute on this podcast. Now, you know, he apologized. It was a whole cute moment. I mean, it is what it is. Sometimes the tea just runneth over. Bravo, y'all understand. You know what I'm saying. Anyway, you know, Carlos calls Gizelle one of the greatest housewives of all time. She has made his top 10 list, and he really kind of goes into her, you know, and the way she can come into a scene, you know, be funny, charismatic. And, you know, guys, listen, when I first started watching Potomac, Gizelle was my favorite character. I'm not even going to front, okay? And she is still someone that I think you almost love to hate her. You know what I'm saying? You might not be a Gizelle fan, but the girl is working, all right? She is working on the show. Meanwhile, so one of the things that they talked about was that Carlos did not think that the first season was great because he says it focused so much on etiquette. And, you know, was she surprised that they got a second season? Now, Gizelle says that she was not surprised that they got a second season because when they were filming season 1, she could feel the chemistry with all the girls. She knew that they were different, and she felt as though the production team was really trying to set them up to be very different from Atlanta, you know, which is a very smart thing to do because you want to be able to have a line of delineation amongst franchises, especially now that you have a second franchise with an all-Black cast, okay? So Carlos says that he actually talked to one of the producers before season 2 aired and got some intel about, you know, things that had happened that were going to happen in season 2 of the show. And about really, it was the scene where Gizelle walked into Monique's house with her BFF and started causing all types of mess. He knew then and there it was on and popping for season 2. He believes that's when the ghost producer Gizelle tapped in. And she does agree. She says any producer will tell you that she listens. She doesn't feel like the producers are her enemies. She knows they will throw her under the bus at any point in time, but it's a working relationship. She says season 1, she was learning, and season 2, she was off to the races, and they unleashed her. Now, Carlos does say, you know, a lot of people talk about, you know, her being the face of the show or Karen being the face of the show, but he feels like Gizelle and Karen are kind of in on the joke, or they also really kind of just don't care about who's the star of the show. It's about what they can do collectively to make the show number 1. Gizelle clarifies that yes, she feels that way, but Karen was not always that way. She says Karen got there. And she does say that she and Karen both know that they have a genuine chemistry. They're not totally there on the same page yet, but sometimes they can leave a scene and say that was some good stuff right there. So Carlos goes back to last season when Karen called Gizelle a Hampton University hoe with a hot box. He asked, how does she feel that these women always, go after her poon as a way to insult her? She says, well, yes, she went to Hampton, and yes, she graduated. Karen did not. She says that Karen a lot of times doesn't know what to say, but you have to keep in mind. She says she herself is formally educated. Karen is not. So whatever is going on between her legs, she's single and can do whatever she wants to do with it, while they are married and try to sneak and do whatever they want with it. And that's all she's going to say about that. And they can move on. They get into a discussion about Robin's relevance on the show. And, they just kind of just back up the idea that, every personality on a show doesn't need to be the same. And I guess I can understand that. I think a lot of people's issues with Robin has been over the course of time is this sort of engagement, romance, soon to be marriage thing that is going on with Robin and Juan. I think the people are just not understanding the progression of it. And so what we can't make sense of, we don't really want to see. But in terms of this past episode, Robin was working, okay? And if that's the Robin we're gonna get, I don't care what's going on with her and Juan, because Robin, whatever her middle name is, Dixon, worked her booty off this past episode. I'm gonna give it to her, okay? So anyway, Carlos gets into Robin disagreeing. Speaking of working, Carlos gets into Robin disagreeing with Gizelle when it came to the whole Chris Bassett situation. And, he asked what made Gizelle feel so uncomfortable. Was it that it was Chris himself as a person being in that room with her, or was it the optics of a man being in her room with her alone? She says it was a bit of both. She says Chris was very drunk. She didn't get why he wanted to go to her room. Then when they got there, it became really uncomfortable. She says he never lured her anywhere or preyed on her. And she says she never accused him of any type of assault, even though the other side is talking real crazy. She says he made her feel uncomfortable. She never thought he would lie and say that she asked him to go to her room. She says that's a lie and it's disturbing. And if a woman tells a man that you made them feel uncomfortable, the man should just say, I'm sorry, and move on. And that's it. Okay. I can kind of agree with that to a certain degree, right? As I stated before, I think there's two things happening here that are kind of making the issue a little bit difficult to process for a lot of people. The first is Gizelle has a right. If she says she feels uncomfortable, I believe that's one thing. But we as a viewing audience know that she also called him a sneaky link and said that she felt like he was trying to see if she was with it or not.
Like it was a situation in which he was trying to see if I was with it. He's a sneaky link.
Okay. That's where we run into some problems, okay? Because in one sentence, you can't say to us that you felt like he wasn't trying to prey on you or lure you. And then in an episode ago, tell us that you felt like he was a sneaky link and that he was trying to see if you were with it. That's the confusion that I have. I don't know about the rest of y'all, but that's the confusion that I have, okay? So Carlos, agrees, and he kind of, with that assessment about the uncomfortability thing, and talks about his own experiences, having run into a customer when he was younger, and the customer felt like she didn't want someone touching her, like a man touching her. And I can get that too, because again, I've had that experience myself where something I might have done made a woman feel comfortable, even though it was not my intent. You just kind of, as a man, have to recognize that there are certain boundaries, even if you, especially, as a gay man, you're kind of like, well, I ain't trying to do nothing to you. But at the same time, it's just really about respecting people's boundaries. So I get that level of conversation and discord, because I think that, if we're having honest conversations here, that is something that we also all have to be able to recognize as a thing. That is a real thing. But it is the sneaky link side of it that starts to border on something else. Anyway, Gizelle says she wasn't going to say anything about it, but, married men have put her in many a situation that made her uncomfortable. And after DMing Ashley, and then allegedly DMing her, she felt like she needed to tell Candace to check her man, and she has no idea why they are still, to this day, talking about this issue, because she feels like it should be dead and done. So it's asked, well, how does she feel about people who say that she's ghost producing and she's gone too far with this whole story? That's something that it could ruin his reputation. She kind of laughs, actually, and then she says she's just speaking her truth. She says Candace has made a bigger issue out of this than Gizelle. She says that Candace went home, told her husband that Gizelle said he lured her and added some extra hot sauce on the issue, and that it was blown out of proportion. She says, you made someone feel uncomfortable, just own it and apologize and keep it pushing. Do y'all feel like Candace went home and added some extra stank on this? Or do you feel like Candace was describing the situation accurately? Just tell me what you think per your point of view, right? So Carlos mentions, he had Candace on the podcast and she's upset about the accusations. And Gizelle is like, what accusations? And I'm like, girl, you don't remember saying that the man was a sneaky link? Although, see, for Candace, she did not hear that part during the filming. She probably saw it in the episode at this point. So, of course, she's going to still be mad about it. And the idea that, again, as she stated in the previous episode, that she felt like he was trying to see if she was with it while he was in the room complaining about his wife. Okay? So anyway, Carlos explains that Candace felt like it was a setup for her husband and that it was a storyline and all that kind of stuff like that. And Gizelle says it's not true. She knows it's not true. She says that Candace knows it's not true. And she wasn't going to say anything to Candace really because she feels like Candace is emotionally very immature. She says she's not a grown woman. A grown woman would have gone home and handled her husband. She says Candace just is not there. She says, why are we still talking about this? And she says that Candace knows that the more you talk about something, the more you make it into a story. So that part of reality TV we do know to be true. Okay, so Carlos does give an example. Well, he gives a couple of examples, so we're going to talk about them. But Carlos explains that he actually had this issue on another show, and I'm like, which show was it? Anyway, he says where a castmate didn't like something that happened, and he said, well, if you don't like it, don't talk about it. But that the cast members kept talking about it, and he said, well, okay, I guess now we got to talk about it, and then it becomes a thing. And that's true in reality TV. If you don't want to talk about something, and you don't want to make it into a thing, then don't talk about it, okay? And Carlos does give an example of how when Monique was on the reunion reading Gizelle and Jamal down from the binder with the accusations about Jamal, he says that it was interesting to him how Gizelle just sat there and didn't say much. Maybe she commented once or twice, but she actually kept it moving. She says, you never once made it a big deal. And Gizelle says, I didn't make it a big deal because it wasn't. She says she knows she and Jamal's truth. She didn't need to explain anything to Monique, and that she's not going to do a bunch of theatrics to explain things that ain't anyone else's business. Now, one could argue that, there was really nothing she could say because these accusations were already out there about the man. But also, too, I think it does kind of play into something that is actually pretty true. If you don't make something into a thing on reality TV, then it never becomes a thing. But the moment that you react to it, it becomes a thing. So interesting. I love these discussions because, I'm a fan of reality TV, and I know I'm kind of like interjecting my own thoughts and opinion, but hey, it's called commentary for a reason. But I always think like, wow, like these little, just a little the psychology of someone who does really, really well in reality TV, someone like a Gizelle, and kind of understanding, how she operates and moves within the reality TV space. It is fascinating to me. So when Carlos is having these conversations, I'm mentally always taking notes, which is why I'm so thankful for these types of conversations when I can hear, a producer talking to a cast member and they talk about the mechanics of how reality TV works. But I'm a nerd, so that's me. Anyway, so they talk about BravoCon and some other things, and you guys will need to listen to the podcast to get into some of the other tea. I'm going to give you the highlights about what I think is important to this channel. Okay. Karen avoiding Charisse. Carlos says Karen is avoiding Charisse as if her name was Co, and then the same word ends with a VID. Okay. So he says, what does Charisse have on Karen? Gizelle says, that's a good question. So we have to wait and see, basically teasing that there's some tea that is going to be spilt. Okay. She says that it shocked all of them that Karen was avoiding her so much, saying that, Karen was saying behind the scenes that she would not film with Charisse. She says, oh my God, Charisse, why is she here? I'm not going to give her that kind of life. She did kind of imitate what she felt like the Grand Dame talks like. So she says she didn't get it, but then suddenly she got it. And the tea began to be spilt. All right. Carlos says, is the tea that Karen allegedly stepped out on her marriage. Gizelle kind of laughs and says, I can't say. She's going to get a phone call from Bravo. She don't want to get in trouble no more. But what she will say is that Charisse has the tea that they have all known, but they just haven't spilt it. She then reminds us of when Karen was talking to her about her fiery hot box. And there was a comment that Gizelle said that she was going to spill Karen's tea over time, but she never really actually did. Gizelle says she kept everything in her back pocket because she doesn't need to do that, spill the tea. But she says sometimes people need to secretly call her and thank her for not talking about the tea that could have been spilt that day. So it seemed as though she's making an inference that after that scene with the hot box and the sing, that she's insinuating or suggesting that maybe Karen allegedly called her and thanked her after the scene for not going into anything deeper. Because after they had that fight, they were just kind of mad at each other for a bit. Then they kind of just figured it out and it really didn't go anywhere. But again, Gizelle says in this interview, she says, but once the tea is spilled, then I got to talk about it because someone else spilled it, not her. And I'm thinking that someone else is Charisse. So then Carlos says, well, the stuff that's been revealed this season, was it what Gizelle was referring to during the hot fiery box fight? And apparently Gizelle says, yes, this is the tea that she was referring to. She says, but even a lot was not spilt. She still has more tea. And this is stuff that hasn't been said yet. But she says Karen doesn't have to worry because 9 times out of 10, she's going to keep it to herself because not everything is for the show. I was like, wow. Interestingly enough, something that I thought that was pretty accurate that I had been thinking about Gizelle for much of probably the past year or so is that Gizelle recognizes what the show needs in order to be successful. She says that they can throw shade at her. It's good for the show. People need to relax because they all get a wire sent to their bank accounts for what they do. This is business. And she understands the big picture and never loses sight of it. And that, yes, you should throw shade at her. She even gave an example of how she used to tell Charisse, if you need to curse me out in the moment, do it. All right. They talk a little bit about Ultimate Girls Trip 3 and her connecting with Portia and them kikiing the entire time. But when it comes to Potomac, she says, we haven't seen anything yet. She says it is nonstop. No one held on to anything for too long. They just keep things moving, and that this trip to Miami is out of control. Now, for the rest of the tea, you guys need to go listen to the Carlos King podcast, Reality with the King, with Gizelle Bryant. It just came out today. Let me know what your thoughts are about this in the comment section down below, and I will catch you guys in the next video.